The first theft was the quiet one. It happened not with a knife to the throat, but with a pen to a ledger. They took his name first. The punishment came later. This is not a story about losing coins or land or cattle. Those losses come with noise, with witnesses, with documents that can be traced. The loss of a name is different. It happens in silence. It is the theft of the map before the theft of the territory. It is the erasure of the path home before the home itself is taken. Consider the cold reality of a world without your name. You stand before a gatekeeper, a clerk, a man with a list. You say who you are. He looks down. His finger traces a line. It stops. He looks up. There is nothing there, he says. You do not exist. This is the hook. This is the moment the door locks from the inside, not with a bang of wood, but with the soft, final click of a record being closed. The snow that follows is not weather. It is the cold of being unseen. The hunger is not for bread. It is the gnawing void where your story used to be. They gave him no sawdust loaf. They gave him blank paper and called it his inheritance. The injustice is not dramatic. It is administrative. It is the most visceral cruelty because it attacks not the body, but the proof that the body has a right to be somewhere. Without a name, you are a ghost in the machine of society. You cannot claim what is yours because you cannot prove you are the you to whom it belongs. Your father's land, your mother's tools, the wages for your labor, all drift away on a tide of bureaucratic silence. The punishment for this theft is not imposed by a judge. It is the natural consequence of the void. It is the slow, inevitable collapse that comes when the foundation of identity is removed. First, they take your name, then they take everything the name was attached to, your lineage, your memory, your legal existence. This is the historical pattern. This is the ancient algorithm of control. Fairy tales understood this. They showed us children cast out with only a crumb of identity, a nickname, a whispered secret name. They showed us that survival began not with finding gold, but with remembering who you were before they told you that you were nobody. The core question hangs in the air, cold and sharp. Why was losing one's name more dangerous than losing wealth? Because wealth is an object. A name is the subject. It is the I that owns, the thou that is owed, the he or she who has a place in the story. Strip that away, and you are not a person who has been robbed. You are an event that has been deleted. The tension here is not of immediate violence. It is of a slow, suffocating erasure. The personal cost is the unraveling of the self. It is looking into a mirror and seeing no reflection, not because the glass is dark, but because the world has agreed to stop reflecting you. This is how societies controlled memory. This is how they managed lineage. By controlling the name, they controlled the narrative of existence. To be unnamed is to be dead. Your actions leave no trace. Your voice makes no echo. Your pain registers in no ledger. This chapter establishes that tension. It defines the theft not as a material loss, but as a metaphysical one. The snow is the absence of recognition. The locked door is the law that no longer knows your face. The hunger is for a past that has been declared a fiction. We begin here, in the silence after the name has been taken. We begin with the quiet, terrible understanding that everything that comes next, the loss of home, of wealth, of freedom, is merely the punishment. The crime was the erasure, and the crime was committed with ink, not iron. Let us follow the unnamed one into the silence. The gate has closed. The ledger is shut. What remains? Not a person, but a collection of senses moving through a world that no longer acknowledges them. This is the personal layer. This is where the abstract theft becomes a daily reality of touch and sound and smell. The air feels different when you have no name. It is thinner, offering less resistance, as if you might pass through walls but find no purchase on the other side. The ground underfoot, once familiar earth from your father's field, is just dirt. It has no story that includes you. The first morning is the coldest. It is not the temperature of the air, but the temperature of the soul. You wake, and for one merciful moment you forget. Then memory returns, not as a story, but as a hollow ache behind the ribs. The place where your name used to live is now an empty room. You rise, you perform the rituals of a person, you wash your face in a stream. The water is shockingly cold on the skin, a sharp, clean sensation that says you are still here, in a body. But when you look at your reflection in the still pool, you do not see your father's brow or your mother's eyes. You see a stranger. The water does not know you either, it simply holds a shape. The hunger comes next, not the grand metaphysical hunger for identity, but the simple, animal need for food. Your stomach clenches. You go to the village, to the baker whose ovens you once tended. You stand at the counter. The smell of fresh bread is overwhelming, a warm, yeasty cloud that makes your mouth water and your emptiness scream. You ask for a loaf on credit against your next week's wages. The baker looks at you. His face is not unkind, it is blank. He does not remember employing you. Why would he? The boy who worked here had a name. You do not. You are just a man asking for bread. He shakes his head slowly, a gesture of mild regret, not malice. No credit for strangers, he says. The injustice is not in his refusal. It is in the fact that you are a stranger to yourself, and therefore to everyone else. You turn away. The sound of your own footsteps is too loud on the cobblestones. Each step echoes the absence. You walk to the edge of the woods, where the village gives way to wildness. Here, the sounds change. The wind in the pines is a long, low sigh. It does not care about names. A crow calls, a harsh, practical sound. You sit on a fallen log, the bark rough and damp against your palms. This is the touch of reality. This log exists, you exist. But the connection between the two, the thread that wove you into the tapestry of the world, has been cut. The punishment unfolds in these small, relentless ways. You cannot buy a nail, you cannot rent a room, you cannot swear an oath. Every transaction, every agreement, every promise in this society is built on the foundation of a name. Without it, you are outside the economy of trust. You are reduced to a pair of hands. You find work, finally, at the edge of a field. A farmer needs a stone cleared. He does not ask your name. He points to the rocks and then to the pile where they should go. The work is brutal. You lift heavy, cold stones. The dirt grinds under your fingernails. The muscles in your back burn. You work until the light fails. The farmer pays you with 2 coarse potatoes and a piece of hard cheese. He places them in your hands, not meeting your eyes. The payment is for the labor of the body, not for the person who performed it. You eat by a small fire you make from deadfall. The smell of wood smoke is sharp and comforting. It is a smell that predates names. The cheese is salty. The potato, baked in the embers, is hot and mealy. This is survival. It is not competence born of skill, but competence born of necessity. It is the animal learning to move in a world that has removed all its signposts. The helper comes not as a person, but as a moment. As you sit by your fire, a fox approaches the edge of the light. It stops watching you, its eyes reflecting the flames. It is thin. You break off a piece of your potato and toss it toward the animal. It sniffs the air, then takes the food and vanishes into the dark. This small act of sharing, of acknowledging another hungry creature, is the first thread you spin back into the world. It is not kindness remembered, but kindness enacted. It proves you can still give, even when you have been rendered nothing. The night deepens, the cold seeps through your clothes. You pull your cloak tighter, the wool is rough against your neck. You listen to the sounds of the forest, the creak of branches, the distant call of an owl. In this space between the village that forgot you and the wilderness that never knew you, you begin the quiet work, not of reclaiming your name, that is gone. but of building a new proof of existence, one sensation, one small act of barter, one shared potato at a time. Now we pull back from the individual in the woods. We examine the machine that erased him. This is the systemic layer. This is analysis. We must advance. We reveal the architecture of disappearance. The pen that crossed out the name was not wielded by a villain in a cloak. It was held by a clerk in a room. The room was one of many in a building of stone. The building was called an archive, a registry, a chancery. Its purpose was memory. Its method was paper. This is the cold, logical mechanism. Identity theft predated property theft because property requires an owner. To take property cleanly, you must first dissolve the owner. The system provides the solvent. Consider the components. First, the list, a simple technology, names in columns, dates of birth, fathers' names. Parishes of origin, the list creates reality. What is not on the list does not exist in the eyes of the system. Second, the rule. A rule states that only what is on the list is valid. A rule states that testimony of flesh is subordinate to testimony of ink. Third, the gatekeeper, the clerk. His duty is not to truth, but to the list. His power comes from his fidelity to the system, not to the people in front of him. He is the human interface of the machine. When our man stood before the gate, this was the mechanism he faced. The clerk looked down. His finger found no line. He applied the rule. He said, "You do not exist." The injustice was not personal. It was procedural. It was the system functioning as designed. This is the new layer of cost. The punishment is not arbitrary cruelty. It is systematic exclusion. Once your name is removed from the list, all subsystems that reference the list fail to recognize you. The tax roll does not know you, so you cannot prove you paid. The land registry does not know you, so you cannot prove you own. The guild register does not know you, so you cannot prove your skill. The military roll does not know you, so you cannot prove you served. You become a ghost in every bureaucratic machine. This is how societies controlled legal existence, not through force, but through documentation. The fairy tale pattern reflects this. The hero is often given a false name, a nickname like Lazy Jack or Boots. This is not whimsy. It is a demotion in the system of recognition. A nickname is an informal tag. It has no legal weight. It cannot be used to claim inheritance. It cannot be used to sign a contract. It is a placeholder that keeps you in the social conversation, but removes you from the legal one. The stepmother who renames the child is engaging in systemic sabotage. She is altering the record of identity to facilitate the later theft of property. The system itself can be the villain. It is a gluttonous machine that consumes identities to streamline its own operations. It wants clean records. It wants unambiguous ownership. A person with a disputed name, a cloudy lineage, a missing document is friction. The system resolves the friction by deleting the problematic entry. Our man was friction. His name was removed. The machine hummed on, more efficient. The smell in the archive is not of rot, but of dust and old paper. The touch is of cold stone floors and dry parchment. The sound is the scratch of pens and the soft thud of ledgers being closed. These are the sensory details of erasure. They are clinical, not dramatic. This is why losing a name is more dangerous than losing wealth. Wealth can be stolen, but the theft leaves evidence, a broken lock, a missing chest, a witness. The theft of a name leaves no physical trace, only an absence in a book. The law, which is built upon such books, cannot see the crime. It can only see the new, cleaner reality where the victim never was. The system protects itself. To accuse it of theft is to speak nonsense. How can you steal what does not exist? The punishment for the victim is total. He is not just poor. He is precluded from the very mechanisms that could make him rich again. He cannot take a loan. He cannot enter into partnership. He cannot sue for wrongs. He is outside the circuit of trust and law. This analysis is fast, paste, it cuts the fat. Subject, verb, object, the system deletes, the man disappears, the property is reallocated. This is the core logic. It is a recipe. 1. Identify the asset. 2. Obscure or destroy the owner's legal identity. 3. Claim the asset through the now, uncontested channel. This pattern repeats across history. Enslavement often began with the taking of a name, replaced by a number or a label. Colonial land grabs were preceded by surveys that recorded empty land whose people were not recognized as legal owners. Modern fraud often starts with identity theft, the hijacking of the digital name to drain the bank account. The mechanism is ancient, the technology updates, the quill becomes the keyboard, the ledger becomes the database, the clerk becomes the algorithm. But the function is the same, to separate the person from the proof of personhood, to make the victim a stranger to his own life. This chapter advances our understanding. The personal cost shown in the woods was the symptom. This is the disease. The systemic architecture that makes the symptom inevitable. We have moved from the chill of the individual to the cold logic of the machine. We see now that the locked door was not wood, but law. The key was not iron, but ink, and the hand that turned the key was following a manual written long before our man was born. We have seen the individual cost. We have seen the systemic machine. Now we connect them. This is integration, the societal layer. When one person loses their name, it is a personal tragedy. When many do, it becomes a cultural condition. A society is a story it tells about itself. Who belongs in that story is determined by names. Remove the names and you rewrite the story. You control memory. You manage lineage. The man in the woods is not alone. He is one thread pulled from a tapestry. The tapestry is the community. His absence creates a whole. The pattern is disrupted. The story of the village becomes incomplete. Who built the well on the hill? The records say it was the mason, but the mason's name is gone. So the well becomes anonymous, a fact without an author. This is how collective memory erodes, not through forgetting, but through deliberate deletion. The punishment for the individual radiates outward. His family cannot speak of him without sounding like they speak of a ghost. His friends must avoid his name in company, lest they draw attention to the gap in the official record. His skills, his jokes, his small acts of kindness, all become unmoored from their source. They float in the communal memory as half-remembered things. Did someone once fix that broken gate? Perhaps. No one can quite say who. This is the societal consequence. The community becomes poorer in its history. It loses the texture of individual contribution. It becomes a place of functions, not of people. The baker bakes, the smith smiths. But the particular baker who added honey to his dough, the specific smith who could sing every ballad, they fade. Their names were the hooks on which their stories hung. Remove the hooks and the stories slip away. This is not accidental, it is a method of control. A society that controls the naming controls the narrative of value. It decides whose work is remembered and whose is forgotten. It decides whose lineage is legitimate and whose is erased. Fairy tales show this in the figure of the wicked stepfamily. They seek to replace the true heir with a false one. The first step is always to discredit or rename the true heir, to make them Cinderella or the little match girl, to reduce them to a descriptor of their menial role, stripping them of their birth name and thus their claim. The societal layer accepts this new name. It becomes how the community knows the person. The true name, the key to inheritance, is forgotten by all but the victim. This integration connects the systemic action to the communal result. The archive deletes the name, the village adjusts its memory. The property is now ownerless or passes to the one whose name remains on the list. The slow pacing here allows the connections to form. The man's personal silence creates a quiet in the community, a missing voice at the harvest song. An empty place at the long table, the smell of the communal feast goes on, the roast meat and spilled ale, the sound of laughter continues. But there is a hollow note, felt more than heard, the touch of a handshake that is no longer offered. The societal body learns to live with amputations, it scars over, it finds new ways to balance, but the integrity is compromised. The community that allows this to happen to one member makes itself vulnerable. It establishes a precedent. The system that can delete one name can delete another. The gatekeeper gains power. The list becomes more important than the people it supposedly represents. This is how societies lose themselves, not in wars or plagues, but in quiet rooms where ledgers are edited. The connection is clear. Individual erasure leads to historical amnesia. The man who lost his name also lost his place in the story of his people. His children, if he had them, would inherit his anonymity. They would be people without a past, easy to displace, easy to exploit. Their claim to any piece of the world would be thin, rooted only in their own labor, not in the legacy of a named ancestor. This is the deeper theft. It is the theft of time. It severs the link between generations. It makes each person an island, disconnected from the continent of history. The punishment for losing your name is therefore borne by your descendants as well. They inherit the silence. They inherit the struggle to prove they belong. This chapter integrates the dots. The personal chill, the systemic mechanism, and now the societal chill that settles over a community when it agrees to forget one of its own. It is not a new layer of analysis, but a synthesis of the layers already revealed. It shows the full cost. The man in the woods feels the cold. The system created the winter. The society is the landscape that remains frozen, having forgotten what summer and who looked like. The days in the woods began to form a rhythm. This is relief, the personal layer, the frantic edge of survival softened into routine. The unnamed man learned the texture of his new world through his hands. He found a place where a stream cut through a bank of clay. The clay was cool and smooth between his fingers, a dense, yielding gray. He remembered something, not a name, but a motion. His father's hands working at a wheel. The memory was in the muscles, not the mind. He took handfuls of the clay. He kneaded it on a flat stone, working out the pebbles and the air. His fingers learned the consistency it needed. Not too wet, not too dry. He shaped a crude bowl, pinching the sides up, smoothing the rim with a wet thumb. He built a small kiln from stones and clay, a dome with an opening for the fire. He gathered dry wood, the sound of snapping twigs sharp in the quiet morning. He lit the fire. The smoke was sharp and resinous at first, then settled into a steady, warm stream. He placed his bowl inside the kiln, sealed the opening, and let the fire burn down to embers. He waited a full day. When he opened it, the bowl was there. Transformed, the clay had become pottery. It was rough, lopsided, but solid. It rang with a faint, clear note when he tapped it with a fingernail. This was competence, not the competence of a master potter, but the competence of a man rebuilding reality from its elements. He could now hold water. He could cook a broth of wild greens, and the occasional fish he caught with his hands in the stream. The smell of that broth, thin and herbal, steaming from his own made bowl, was the smell of agency. It was not wealth, it was a foundation. The helper became more consistent. The fox returned. It would appear at the edge of the clearing in the late afternoon, a shadow among shadows. The man would leave out scraps, a fish head, some gristle. The fox would take them and vanish. One day the fox did not vanish immediately. It sat just beyond the firelight and watched him work. The man spoke to it. Not with words of a name, but with the quiet sounds one makes to an animal, a soft click of the tongue, a low hum. The fox's ears twitched. This was a different kind of conversation. It was built on presence, not on titles. The man's hands were his primary tools. They were cracked from the cold water and the clay. The skin on his palms grew tough. He used a sharp flint to shape a piece of hardwood into a digging stick. The sound of scraping, the feel of the wood grain giving way under the stone, these were his daily music. He found a patch of earth that caught the sun. He cleared it of stones, his back aching with the work. He planted seeds he had gathered from wild plants, pushing them into the dark soil with his thumb. This was his quiet virtue, not heroism, but cultivation. He was making a small, undeniable mark on the world. A bowl existed because he made it. A row of green shoots existed because he planted them. These things did not need his name to be real. They needed only his care. The cold at night was still deep. He wove a rough mat from reeds to sleep on, the dried stalks rustling under his weight. He repaired his cloak with sinew from a rabbit, the needle a sharpened bone. His world was small, bounded by the stream, the clay bank, his garden, and the fire, but within it he was the author of every function. The punishment of erasure was still there, a constant background hum. But in this chapter, the foreground is filled with the scent of wood smoke and wet earth, the touch of smooth pottery, the sound of the wind in the pines that was neither hostile nor friendly, but simply present. This is grounding. It lowers the heart rate from the analytical terror of systems and societies. It returns us to the body, to the fact that even when the world declares you nobody, your hands can still make something. Your breath still fogs in the morning air. You can still feel the sun on your face. This is the practical wisdom of the fairy tale. The cast-out child does not immediately storm the castle. They learn to make a fire. They befriend a creature. They find a skill. This is the manual's first instruction for the powerless. Survive, not just in body, but in spirit. Build a tiny kingdom where your actions are the law. The fox is not a magical helper. It is a fellow creature responding to consistency and lack of threat. The bowl is not a magical artifact. It is the result of observation, memory, and labor. This chapter is slow. It lets the compound sentences breathe. It details the process, not the outcome. It shows that after the cruelty, there is not immediate justice, but there is the possibility of a next breath and a next, and the making of a thing that holds water. This is how one begins to answer the theft of a name, not by shouting it into the void, but by silently, stubbornly making the world acknowledge your hands. We now look beyond the single man in the single woods. We examine the pattern across time. This is analysis, the historical layer we must advance. We reveal that the theft of the name is not an innovation of a modern bureaucracy. It is an ancient, recurring technology of power. Consider the evidence. In the empires of the ancient river valleys, conquest was often followed by census. The purpose was not merely to count people, but to rename them, to assign them a number, a category, a new identity that tied them to the state, not to their ancestors. The individual name, connecting a person to a family and a place, was suppressed. The new identifier connected them to a tax obligation and a labor draft. This is the first historical case. The name is taken, replaced with a functional tag. The punishment, the loss of ancestral land and freedom, follows logically from the new, state-owned identity. Move forward. In the feudal systems of the Middle Ages, serfs often had no surname. They were known by their father's name or by the land they worked. John, son of William, Elena of the East Field. This was not a full name in the legal sense. It was a description of function and location. It could be changed by the Lord. If John was moved to a different plot, he became John of the West Field. His identity was mutable, tied to his utility to the manor. His claim to any particular piece of earth was tenuous, resting on the Lord's continued assignment. The Lord's name, however, was fixed. It was attached to the manor itself in stone and parchment. The systemic imbalance is clear. The one with the fixed name owns. The ones with mutable descriptors work. The fairy tale pattern echoes this. The hero is often the miller's son or the youngest daughter. They are defined by relation and role. The villain, the king, the stepmother, the ogre has a title. A title is a supername. It carries legal weight. The conflict is between the one defined by function and the one defined by title. The hero must earn a name or reclaim one to change the balance of power. Now consider the age of exploration and colonization. When European ships made landfall on distant shores, their first acts often included naming. They named the rivers, the mountains, the bays. They did this not for convenience but for possession. To name a thing on a map was to claim it for the crown. The existing people often had names for these places. Those names were ignored, overwritten. The people themselves were often renamed in ledgers, categorized as savages or natives, generic terms that stripped them of individual and tribal identity. This erasure of existing names was the prerequisite for the theft of the land. If the land had no recognized owner in the European legal system, it was declared terra nullius, nobody's land. The punishment, the displacement and resource theft came later. The pattern holds: first, destabilize or delete the existing identity structure. Second, impose a new one that serves the powerful. Third, extract wealth under the new legal reality. This analysis is fast-paced. It cuts across centuries: subject, verb, object, empires rename, feudal lords reassign, colonizers overwrite. The mechanism is constant. The technology evolves from clay tablets to parchment rolls, to printed surveys, to digital databases. The goal remains: to separate a person or a people from the narrative of ownership, to make them ghosts in their own history so that their assets can be reallocated. The new layer of cost revealed here is civilizational. It is not just one man losing his plot. It is entire cultures losing their connection to their geography, their genealogy, their memory. The sound is not the wind in the pines of one wood, but the silent crumbling of 10,000 stories into dust. The smell is the rot of archives where the true names were stored and forgotten. The touch is the cold, smooth surface of a monument inscribed with the names of the conquerors, built over the graves of the unnamed. This is why losing a name is more dangerous than losing wealth at the historical scale. Wealth can be rebuilt if the people and their story remain intact. But if the name, the story, the map of belonging is destroyed, the people are unmoored. They become refugees in time, unable to point to a past that proves their right to a future. The fairy tales that survived are the practical manuals from the other side of this process. They are the stories whispered by the unnamed, teaching the next generation how to survive the erasure, how to remember in secret, how to use the very skills forced upon them to eventually reclaim a place in the story. This chapter advances our understanding to the macro level. We see the algorithm of control not as a personal misfortune or a systemic glitch, but as a historical constant, a tool in the kit of statecraft and expansion. The man in our woods is not an anomaly. He is a data point in a long, grim trend. His quiet virtue with clay and seed is the ancient, universal response. It is the refounding of a world, however small, on principles that predate and outlast the empires of names. We return from the sweep of history to a specific connection. This is integration, the systemic layer. How does the naming system create the property system? They are not separate machines, they are gears in the same clockwork. The name is the primary gear, it turns the others. Consider the logic. Property is not a thing. It is a relationship between a person and a thing, recognized and enforced by society. That relationship requires a stable identifier for the person. The name provides that identifier. Without a fixed name, the relationship cannot be recorded. It cannot be transferred, it cannot be inherited, it is ephemeral. lasting only as long as the person holds the thing in their hands. The moment they set it down, anyone can claim it, because no durable record connects it to them. This is the medium cognitive load. We connect the dots between identity and economy. The man in the woods has built a small domain, his bowl, his garden, his shelter. In his personal reality, these are his property. He made them, he tends them. But in the societal and legal reality, they are not property, they are merely objects in a space. If another person came and took his bowl, he would have no recourse. He could not go to a magistrate and say, "That is my bowl." The magistrate would ask, "Who are you?" He has no name to give that the magistrate's records recognize. The magistrate would ask, "How do you prove it is yours?" He has no bill of sale, no mark of ownership tied to a recognized identity. His claim rests on sweat and memory. The system does not trade in sweat and memory, it trades in names and titles. This integration shows the trap. The very act of surviving, of creating value through labor, is vulnerable if it is not backed by a name. The fairy tale hero who builds a cottage in the woods, or spins straw into gold, faces the same vulnerability. The villain, the king or the ogre, can arrive and claim the creation because the hero lacks the legal identity to defend it. The hero's trade, their skill, is both their salvation and their point of exposure. They can create magnificent things, but they cannot legally own them until they secure a name. This is why the narratives so often culminate in a marriage, or in the hero stating their true name and lineage. Marriage often brings a new name, a legal identity through association. Stating the true name reestablishes the connection to a pre-existing legal identity, usually one of noble birth. Both are methods of plugging back into the property system. The slow pacing here allows the connection to solidify. The name is the account number, property is the balance in the account. If the account number is deleted, the balance, no matter how hard-earned, becomes orphaned. It floats in the system, waiting to be claimed by whoever can provide a valid account number. This is the deeper logic of the theft. The thieves did not just want his father's land, they wanted a clean transaction. By deleting his name, they orphaned the asset. Then they could present their own name as the next valid claimant. The system, designed to prevent ambiguity, would accept the new claim because the old one had been rendered null. The punishment for the victim is therefore complete. He loses not only the past asset, but the future fruits of his own labor. Everything he builds remains orphaned, vulnerable to the next person with a recognized name who wants it. This integration connects the personal struggle in the woods to the systemic reality explained earlier. His hands make the bowl. The system refuses to acknowledge his ownership of the bowl. The two realities exist in parallel, one of substance, one of record. The manual for the powerless must therefore address both. It must teach how to create substance, yes. But it must also teach how to navigate, or eventually subvert, the system of record. Sometimes this is done through alliance, marrying into a name. Sometimes it is done through reputation, becoming so skilled that the community grants you a nickname that hardens into a de facto legal identity. The blacksmith known to all as Iron Henry may eventually have that name entered into a guild roll. The name is earned through trade, not inherited. But it serves the same function. It creates a hook for property to hang on. This chapter does not introduce new horror or new history. It synthesizes. It shows the economic trap sprung by the identity theft. The man is not just cold and hungry. He is trapped in an economy of the immediate, unable to store value, unable to build capital, because the vessel for storing value, his legal identity, has been shattered. Every day he must rebuild from zero. This is the quiet, relentless punishment that comes after the name is taken. And it is the precise reason why the loss of the name is more fundamentally dangerous than the loss of any single piece of wealth. Wealth can be regrown if you have a secure plot to grow it in. The name is the plot. We examine the cultural machinery that makes name, stripping acceptable. This is analysis, the societal layer we must advance. We reveal how societies normalize the erasure of the individual to serve the narrative of the powerful. It is not enough to have a system that can delete names. The people who operate the system and the community that lives under it must believe this is right, or at least inevitable. They must be conditioned. This conditioning is achieved through story, through language, through social ritual. Consider the archetypes: the wicked stepmother, the jealous king, the greedy ogre. In the tales, these figures are often the ones who rename the hero. They call them cinders or lazy or stupid. The community, the court, the village often adopts this new name. They laugh at it, they use it. This is not just cruelty, it is a social process of reclassification. The powerful one provides a new, demeaning label. The society, through repetition, makes it real. The hero's true name and the rights attached to it fade from public memory. The new name becomes their social identity. This is propaganda at the folk level. It teaches a lesson. It teaches that identity is not intrinsic. It is granted by those in power. It can be taken away. It can be replaced with a label that defines you by your perceived lack. The societal layer absorbs this lesson. It learns to see the unnamed not as victims of a crime, but as people who simply are what they are called: lazy, worthless, a servant. This is the core logic mechanism of social control. It externalizes the blame. The man is not poor because his name was stolen. He is poor because he is lazy. The woman is not a servant because her inheritance was taken. She is a servant because she is covered in cinders. The punishment is thus framed as a natural consequence of their character, not of a prior theft. This analysis is fast-paced. It dissects the narrative weapon: subject, verb, object. The powerful rename, the society echoes, the victim internalizes. The property transfer looks like justice or natural order. The new layer of cost is psychological and cultural. It is the colonization of the mind. The victim begins to doubt their own memory. Did I ever have a different name? Did my father truly own that land? The community's consensus reality overwrites personal memory. The smell here is not of rot, but of the perfumed lies told in court. The touch is the cold shoulder of a former friend who now uses your mocking nickname. The sound is the laughter of the crowd, a social weapon that enforces the new identity. Fairy tales show the hero's resistance to this. They show the hero holding a secret, a glass slipper, a spinning wheel, a true name whispered only to a helper. This secret is the kernel of the old, true identity, preserved against the social consensus. It is the practical manual's instruction. When society renames you, do not argue publicly. Keep a piece of the truth hidden. Nourish it in silence. Let your skill, your trade, be the vessel for that truth. The skill does not lie. The perfectly woven cloth, the exquisite meal, the unbreakable sword, these are testimonies that cannot be renamed. They are evidence of a competence that exists outside the granted label. This chapter advances our understanding from the mechanics of systems to the mechanics of belief. We see that the theft of the name is often a two-stage process. First, the legal deletion from the record. Second, the social imposition of a new, lesser identity to justify the deletion and its consequences. The punishment is therefore compounded. You are not just legally erased, you are socially reconstituted as someone deserving of erasure. This is why reclaiming a name in these stories is so often a public, dramatic act. The fitting of the slipper, the recognition of the weaving, the stating of the true name at the feast, it is not just a personal victory. It is a shattering of the social consensus. It forces the community to admit its complicity in a lie. It restores not just property, but truth. The societal layer is where the crime is laundered into normalcy. This analysis shows the depth of the trap. The powerless must fight not only against clerks and ledgers, but against the stories their neighbors tell about them. Their trade, their quiet skill, becomes their counter-narrative. It is the thing they can point to and say, "This is real, this I made. This proves I am more than the name you gave me." The manual thus advises, cultivate a skill so undeniable that it becomes your argument when words fail. The skill deepened. The unnamed man did not just make a bowl, he made a better bowl. He found a different clay, finer, with a faint red hue. He learned to mix it with crushed sand from the stream bed to prevent cracking. He built a proper kiln, a low oven of stone and clay that held heat longer. The fire had to burn just so. He learned the smell of the right smoke, clean and hot, not the choking smolder of green wood. He learned the sound of the clay in the kiln, a faint ticking as it cooled, a sign it was hardening true. His fingers, once cracked and sore, developed calluses in precise places. The pads of his thumbs grew tough from smoothing rims. The fox was a constant now. It would bring things, a dropped feather, a shiny pebble. It would leave them at the edge of the clearing. The man would take them and nod. He began to leave things in return, a particularly smooth bowl, filled with water, placed in the shade. The fox would drink from it. This was their economy. It was based on observation and silent exchange. No names, no ledgers. The man's garden grew. He built a low fence of woven branches to keep rabbits out. The smell of turned earth and young plants was rich in the morning air. He found wild garlic and transplanted it. Its sharp green scent cut through the smell of the forest floor. He was not just surviving, he was curating. He was applying a quiet, persistent intelligence to his small domain. This is relief, the personal layer, the low cognitive load of doing, not analyzing. The tone is not of struggle, but of gradual mastery. The punishment of erasure was still the sky above, but he was building a world under it. His trade was his anchor. Each pot that did not crack, each vegetable that ripened, was a vote against the void. It was a statement written in clay and leaf. I am here, I act. Therefore I am, the helper, the fox, was a mirror to this process. It was not a magical creature granting wishes. It was a wild thing that had chosen, for its own reasons, to tolerate his presence and engage in a rudimentary trade. Its trust was earned through consistency, through the absence of threat, through the offering of water and food. This is the overlooked ally of the fairy tales. The poor woodcutter who shares his bread does so not because of a prophecy, but because the hero was kind to him when no one else was. The stray dog stays because the hero feeds it. The alliance is built on small, real acts. It is a network built outside the official system of names and titles. It is a network of function and mutual benefit. The man's hands were his primary tool, but his mind was his greatest asset. He observed the path of the sun across his clearing. He noted where the frost lingered longest. He adjusted his planting. He watched how water flowed after a rain and dug a small channel to direct it to his garden. This was competence born of attention. It was the quiet virtue of the patient observer. The world, even this small piece of it, was full of information. He learned to read it. The sound of the wind in the pines meant a change in weather. The behavior of birds could signal the approach of a predator. His senses, sharpened by necessity, became his library. This chapter is slow. It lets the process unfold. It grounds us in the sensory reality of the work. The rough texture of the woven fence under his palm, the cool, slippery feel of the wet clay, the tart taste of a wild berry, the distant cry of a hawk. These are the details of a life being built from the ground up. They are the antithesis of the abstract, paper-based reality that deleted him. They are undeniable. You cannot argue with a ripe tomato. You cannot debate the water-holding capacity of a well-fired pot. These things exist. Their existence, through his agency, begins to weave a new kind of identity for him, not a legal name, but a functional signature. He is the one who makes the red clay pots. He is the one whose garden does not fail. This identity is local. It is known to the fox, and perhaps, if anyone from the village ever ventured this deep into the wood, it would be known to them too. They would not know his name, but they might know his work. This is the beginning of reputation. Reputation is a shadow name. It is a name earned, not given. It is the manual's next lesson for the powerless. When the given name is taken, start earning a new one through the quality of your hands. This chapter provides relief from the analytical dissection of systems and societal conditioning. It returns to the body, to the earth, to the simple, profound act of making something well. It shows that in the space between the theft and the potential return, there is not just waiting, there is cultivation. We now weave the threads together. This is integration, the historical layer. We connect the ancient narrative patterns of fairy tales to the concrete historical records of name erasure. The tales are not mere fantasies. They are fossilized memories of systemic processes. They are the practical manuals because they encode the strategies that worked, or the warnings of what happens when you fail. Consider the common motif. The youngest son is sent away with nothing but a crust of bread. He is often given a nickname like Simpleton. His brothers have proper names or are defined by their trades, the soldier, the tailor. The youngest is defined by his perceived lack. This is the narrative representation of disinheritance. The legal name, the claim to the father's estate, is functionally stripped. He is sent out with a sawdust loaf, a promise that turns to nothing in the mouth. This is the hook. It mirrors historical practices of primogeniture, where the eldest son inherited the name and the land, and younger sons were given a small cash settlement and sent away to make their own name, often through the church, the military, or trade. If that settlement was withheld or stolen, the younger son became exactly like our man in the woods, a person without a legal anchor in the family property. The tale then shows the survival. The simpleton is kind to animals, he shares his crust, he helps an old woman. These are not random acts of piety. They are investments in a social network outside the official hierarchy. The animals and the old woman are the overlooked allies, the poor woodcutters, the marginalized who operate in the cracks of the system. Their aid is practical. They give information, a tool, a magical object that is really a metaphor for a skill or a piece of forgotten knowledge. The hero's survival is based on this network and on his own developing competence. The historical parallel is the guild system, or the networks of journeymen and vagrants who shared knowledge and offered mutual aid outside the structures of landed inheritance. The tale then shows the return and the trap. The villain, often the king or the wealthy merchant, wants what the hero has gained, the golden goose, the singing harp, the princess's hand. The hero does not challenge the villain to a duel. He uses his trade, his network, his hard-won skill. He lays a trap that exploits the villain's own greed. The feast that poisons, the dress that stifles, the riddle that cannot be answered, these are not acts of violence. They are acts of superior knowledge and preparation. They are the powerless using the system's own rules or the villain's own psychology against them. Historically, this mirrors the ways disenfranchised groups used legal loopholes or used their specialized trades to gain leverage over the powerful. A guild could withhold its labor. A clever peasant could use manorial law to his advantage. The final collapse, where the villain is destroyed by their own greed, is the narrative representation of systemic justice. It is not a revolution. It is the overreach of power creating its own downfall. The hero, through patience and skill, simply positions himself to witness it. The result is not a kingdom won through blood, but a position earned through wisdom. He marries the princess, not as a conqueror, but as the only one who solved the riddle. He gains a title, a name, through merit. This integration connects our analysis to the stories. The man in the woods is living a fairy tale in slow motion. His name was taken. He was given the sawdust loaf of bureaucratic silence. He survived through quiet skill and an alliance with a fox, the overlooked ally. He has not yet faced the return of the villain, but the pattern is set. The historical layer shows that this pattern repeats because it describes a fundamental power dynamic. The tales are the survival manuals because they compress generations of lived experience into a memorable formula. They teach, do not despair when your name is taken. Be kind to those below you, for they may be your only allies. Develop a skill so well that it becomes your argument. Wait for the powerful to overreach, then use your skill to secure your place. This integration is slow, paced. It allows the connections to resonate. The smell of the archive from Chapter 3 is the same as the smell of the stepmother's locked room where Cinderella's true clothes are hidden. The touch of the cold ledger is the touch of the glass slipper, a hard, unforgiving object that only fits one true foot. The sound of the wind in the pines around the man's clearing is the same as the sound in the forest where the children are abandoned. A sound of nature indifferent to human names. By integrating the tale and the history, we see the manual's instructions are not childish. They are the distilled wisdom of those who have navigated the theft of identity and property for centuries. They teach that the first loss, the loss of the name, is the critical one. Everything after is consequence. And the path back is not through reclaiming the name by force, but through building a new proof of existence so solid that the world must eventually acknowledge it, and in doing so, give you a name you have earned. We turn to the present. The system has evolved. This is analysis, the systemic layer we must advance. We reveal how the ancient pattern of name theft is replicated and amplified by modern technology. The ledger is now a database. The clerk is an algorithm. The archive is a server farm humming in a climate-controlled room. The principle is unchanged. Identity theft predates property theft. The digital name, the username, the social security number, the biometric hash, these are the new names. They are the keys to the modern property system, which includes bank accounts, credit lines, digital assets, and reputation scores. To cleanly take these assets, you must first compromise the key. The new layer of cost is velocity and scale. In the past, erasing a name from a parchment roll was a manual act. It affected one person or one family. Today, a database breach can expose millions of digital names at once. An algorithmic decision can deplatform a person, effectively deleting their social and economic identity with a few lines of code. The punishment is instant and far-reaching. Your credit score plummets, your accounts are frozen, your online storefront vanishes. Your ability to transact, to travel, to communicate is severed. This is the systemic architecture of the 21st century. It is more efficient, more pervasive, and often more opaque than its historical predecessors. The smell is the sterile, ozone-tinged air of a server room. The touch is the smooth, cool glass of a smartphone screen. The sound is the silent processing of data, the hum of fans cooling silicon. The villain in this system is often not a person, but a flaw in the code, a business model that monetizes personal data, or a policy designed for efficiency over justice. The system itself, optimized for security and profit, creates vulnerabilities and then blames the users when they are exploited. The fairy tale pattern holds. The hero is stripped of their digital identity. They are locked out of their own life. Their survival depends on navigating a Byzantine customer service labyrinth, proving they are who they say they are to a system that no longer believes them. Their quiet virtue is technological literacy, patience, and the preservation of offline, physical proofs of identity that the system still, grudgingly, accepts. The helper is the rare human customer service agent who listens, or the online community of fellow victims who share workarounds. This analysis is fast-paced. It connects the ancient to the now. Subject, verb, object, databases are hacked, algorithms decide, identities are voided. Assets are liquidated, the core logic is the same. Destabilize the identifier, then harvest the value attached to it. The new implication is the potential for total, simultaneous erasure. A person can lose their name not just in one ledger, but in every interconnected system at once. They become a ghost in the machine globally. This is why the loss of the modern name, the digital identity, is arguably more dangerous than the loss of ancient wealth. It can happen faster, and it can lock you out of the very tools you need to recover. The manual for the powerless must now include digital hygiene. It must teach the importance of offline backups, of diversifying identity anchors, of understanding the terms of service that govern your digital name. It must teach that your online reputation is a new form of property, vulnerable to the same old tricks of slander and erasure. The tales warned us. The stepmother who spreads lies about the heroine is engaging in reputation theft, a prelude to stealing her place at the ball. Today, that plays out as fake reviews, deepfakes, and coordinated disinformation campaigns. The defense is the same. Cultivate a real skill, a real product, a real community that knows your true worth. Let that be your anchor when the digital storm tries to erase you. This chapter advances our understanding into the contemporary landscape. It shows that the battle has not ended. It has migrated to a new frontier. The quiet archivist of the digital age must be a curator of their own data, a preserver of their own proofs. They must build, like the man in the woods, a small domain of verifiable truth that exists outside the dominant system, a personal website, a physical portfolio, a network of real human trust. These are the clay pots and the fenced gardens of the information age. They are the things you can point to and say, "This is mine, I made it," and its existence does not depend on a platform's permission. The punishment for losing your digital name is the same cold, hungry silence. It is the inability to buy, to sell, to speak, to be seen. The system has just become better at delivering that silence instantly and to more people at once. The lesson of the fairy tale is thus more urgent. Guard your name, but know that if it is taken, your survival depends on the things that cannot be deleted with a keystroke: your skill, your hands, your kindness to the overlooked, your memory. Start building your clearing now. The man's reputation began to travel not on paper but on foot. This is relief, the personal layer. A hunter from the village, tracking a deer, stumbled upon the clearing. He saw the garden, neat and thriving behind its woven fence. He saw the kiln, cold but clearly used. He saw the man shaping clay at his stone table. The man looked up. He did not speak. The hunter, a gruff man named Olaf, nodded slowly. He had heard rumors of someone living deep in the wood. A ghost, some said, a bandit, others whispered. But this was no ghost. This was a man with dirt on his hands and a row of well-made pots drying in the sun. Olaf pointed to a pot. He held up 2 fingers, then pointed to the rabbit hanging from his belt. A trade, the man considered. He nodded. He selected 2 pots, one large, one small, and placed them on the ground between them. Olaf took the pots. He left the rabbit. He left without another word. The next week Olaf returned. He brought a worn but serviceable axe head, its handle broken. He pointed to it, then to the man, then made a shaping motion with his hands. The man understood. He took the axe head. Over the next few days, he built a small hot fire. and used stones as tools to straighten the bent metal and sharpen the edge. He found a sturdy piece of oak and carved a new handle, fitting it snugly into the socket. When Olaf returned, the man presented the restored axe. Olaf tested the edge with his thumb. He nodded, a look of genuine respect on his face. He left a sack of salt and a coil of good rope. This was the beginning. The man's skill was his new currency. He did not have a name in these transactions. He was the potter in the wood, or the one who fixes things. It was a descriptor, but it was a descriptor based on function and quality, not on mockery or lack. It was a reputation earned. The fox watched these exchanges from the tree line. It did not approach when others were near. The man continued to leave water and scraps for it. Their silent partnership continued, a private thread in his growing web of connections. The man's hands were now adept. He could feel the quality of clay just by rubbing it between his fingers. He could tell if a piece of wood would make a good handle by its weight and grain. His garden yielded potatoes, beans, and herbs. The smell of his stew, now flavored with salt and wild onions, was rich and comforting. The sound of his axe splitting wood for the kiln was a clean, sharp crack that echoed in the clearing. This chapter is slow, it is grounding, it shows the quiet victory of competence. The punishment of erasure is still a fact. He cannot go to the town fair. He cannot buy land, he cannot vote, but within the sphere of his influence he has created a micro-economy based on barter and mutual benefit. He has built a small, resilient system that operates parallel to the official one that rejected him. This is the relief after the storm of analysis. It is the proof that the manual's instructions work. Develop a skill, be reliable, engage in fair trade. Build a network, however small. These actions create a shadow identity, a functional self that can sustain a life. The helper, Olaf, is not a noble patron. He is a practical man who sees value and respects craft. His aid is not charity, it is commerce. But in a world that declared the man a non-person, this commerce is a form of recognition. It says, you exist because you are useful. It is a fragile foundation, but it is more solid than the void he started with. The sensory details here are of work and exchange, the metallic smell of the hot axe head being worked, the rough texture of the new oak handle, the sharp, clean scent of the split wood, the savory smell of the stew, the weight of the salt sack in his hand. These are the tangible rewards of his quiet virtue. They are not wealth in the legal sense, they are wealth in the material sense. They keep him alive, and they grant him a measure of dignity. This chapter lowers the heart rate. It shows that even within the trap of systemic erasure, there are pockets of agency. The man is not waiting for a hero to save him. He is becoming the hero of his own small story, one pot, one repaired tool, one traded rabbit at a time. The fox, the overlooked ally, is a reminder that his first act of rebuilding was an act of kindness to another creature. That foundation of empathy has borne fruit in the form of a silent companion, and now it extends to a practical relationship with a villager. The path forward is not through reclaiming his old name in a dramatic showdown. It is through the slow, steady expansion of this reputation, this network, this proof of existence written in clay and cured metal and growing things. We examine how communities can resist collective erasure. This is integration, the societal layer. The man in the woods is one node. But resistance is rarely a solitary act. It becomes a social strategy. When a system seeks to delete names, the community can choose to remember. It can create parallel records. It can tell stories that preserve the true names and the true histories. This is the medium cognitive load of connecting individual survival to collective action. The village that forgot the man's name could, in theory, remember him. It could do so through oral history. The hunter Olaf might tell his family about the skilled potter in the wood. His wife might tell a neighbor. The story would travel not as official history, but as folk knowledge. This knowledge creates a shadow registry. It says, there is a man who lives there, he makes good pots, he fixed Olaf's axe. This is a social identity, fragile but real. It operates outside the ledger. It is the community taking back a small piece of the narrative power. Historically, this is how marginalized groups preserved their identities. Enslaved people who were given new names by their masters often kept their true names secret, passing them down orally within their families. Indigenous communities, whose place names were overwritten on maps, continued to use the original names among themselves. These acts are not just sentiment. They are practical resistance. They preserve the map of belonging. They keep alive the claim to a different story. The fairy tales themselves are products of this process. They are the stories told by the powerless, preserving the patterns of their oppression and the blueprints for their survival. They are the community's memory, encoded in narrative. This integration connects the man's personal reputation to a larger possibility. His skill makes him memorable. The community's decision to talk about him, to trade with him, is a small act of defiance against the official record that says he does not exist. It is a way of saying, we will decide who has value in our world, not just the clerk in the stone building. The societal layer is where the battle for memory is fought. The powerful use archives and laws to control the official story. The powerless use stories and networks to preserve the true one. The smell here is the smell of a hearth fire around which stories are told. The touch is the handshake of a secret agreement, a pact of remembrance. The sound is the low murmur of voices sharing a truth that is not in the books. This is not a call to revolution. It is a description of a slow, cultural process. The man's clearing becomes a node in this network of unofficial memory. People who have also been wronged by the system, or who simply value skill over paperwork, might seek him out. They might bring him tools to fix, not just for the fix, but to be part of his story, to add a thread to this alternative tapestry. This integration shows that the punishment of erasure can be mitigated not by changing the system head-on, but by building a counter-community that operates by different rules. The rules are based on observed character, demonstrated skill, and mutual aid. These rules are older than the legal system. They are the rules of the tribe, the village, the guild. They were the original system. The legal system of names and titles often grew out of them, and then sought to supersede and control them. The Manual for the Powerless, therefore, advises reconnecting with these older forms of social validation. Build a reputation, honor your word. Contribute to your community. These actions build social capital, which can be a buffer when legal capital is stolen. This chapter does not introduce a new cost. It synthesizes the societal dynamics we have seen. It shows that the community is not just a passive audience to the theft. It can be an accomplice by adopting the mocking nickname. Or it can be a resister by remembering the true skill and the true story. The choice is cultural. The tone is slow, reflective. It considers how the threads of individual action and community memory can weave a safety net, however fragile, beneath those the system tries to drop. The man in the woods may never get his name back in the ledger, but he might earn a place in the song. The villagers sing about the strange and skillful hermit of the deep wood. And in that song, his deeds, if not his birth name, will be remembered. That is a form of legacy. It is a form of property that cannot be easily stolen, because it lives in the breath and the memory of the people. We consider the long arc. This is analysis, the historical layer. We must advance. We reveal the generational cost of name theft. The punishment does not end with the individual. It ripples through time, altering the destiny of lineages. When a name is erased from the legal record, it severs the chain of inheritance. not just of property, but of memory, of trade secrets, of social standing. A blacksmith's son, if the father's name and guild membership are deleted, cannot inherit the forge. He cannot claim the tools. He cannot use his father's reputation as credit. He starts from zero or less than zero, burdened by a silence about his origins. This is the historical implication at the family level. The loss compounds across generations. The grandson knows even less. The family story becomes a rumor, then a myth, then nothing. They become a people without a past, easy to displace, easy to exploit, because they cannot point to a continuous thread of ownership or belonging. This is how societies engineer durable inequality. They do not just take land once. They take the mechanism by which land is held across time, which is the mechanism of named lineage. The fairy tale often resolves with the restoration of the true heir. This is not just a happy ending, it is the repair of the generational rupture. It is the reconnection of the present to a legitimizing past. The hero proves their lineage often through a token, a skill, or a physical trait like fitting a slipper. This proof re-knits the torn fabric of time. It says, I am the continuation. Therefore, all that was interrupted belongs to me again. The new layer of cost is temporal disinheritance. It is the theft of future potential from one's descendants. The man in the woods, if he had children, would have nothing to pass on but his skills and his silence. His children would be born into his anonymity. They would inherit his struggle to prove they exist. This analysis is fast-paced. It looks at consequences across decades and centuries. Subject, verb, object, a name is deleted, a lineage is broken. A family's trajectory is altered, wealth can be lost and regained in a lifetime. A broken lineage can take generations to mend, if it is ever mended at all. This is why the loss of the name is more dangerous. It attacks time itself. It makes you an orphan in history. Consider historical records of persecuted groups. When they were forced to convert or flee, they often changed their names to survive. Those new names became the legal reality for their children. The old names, the old connections to place and people, went underground or were lost. The punishment for that initial act of coercion was a diaspora of identity, a fragmentation that lasted for centuries. The manual for the powerless encoded in the tales often includes a secret, a hidden heirloom, a whispered true name, a distinctive birthmark. These are the tools for repairing the generational rupture. They are the seeds of memory meant to be passed down, so that a future generation might one day say, we remember who we are. And therefore, we can reclaim what was ours. This chapter advances our understanding to its deepest chronological layer. We see that the crime is not just against a person, but against their potential children and their children's children. It is a theft of legacy. The smell is the dust of abandoned family Bibles where the true names were once recorded. The touch is the cold metal of a signet ring that no longer has a legal seal to make. The sound is the silence of a family story that was never told. The man in the woods is living this cost in the present. He is the broken link. His quiet work with clay and axe is an attempt to start a new lineage, however humble. He is building a legacy of skill, because he has been robbed of a legacy of name. This is the ultimate wisdom of the fairy tale survival manual. When your name is taken, and with it your past, you must become the founder of a new line. You must create value so tangible, so useful, that it becomes the inheritance for those who come after you. Your pots, your repaired tools, your knowledge of the land, these can be taught. They can be passed on. They can become the new family trade, the new source of reputation. In this way, you defeat the theft of time not by looking backward, but by building forward. You accept that the old name is gone. You build a new one, forged in the fire of your own labor. This is the quiet, long, short-term strategy for outlasting the powerful who think only in terms of ledgers and immediate gain. They steal a name written in ink. You are writing a new one in the grain of the wood and the glaze of the clay, a name that will only be read by the hands of those who come after. We synthesize the strategies. This is integration, the systemic layer. Given the architecture of erasure, from the personal to the historical, what are the practical, systemic countermeasures? This is the medium cognitive load of connecting the analysis to actionable wisdom. The manual's instructions coalesce into a coherent philosophy for navigating and surviving within systems designed to delete you. First, decentralize your identity. Do not let it exist in only one ledger, one database, one social circle. The man in the woods has done this. His identity exists in the clay of his pots, in the memory of the hunter Olaf, in the trust of the fox, in the growth of his garden. These are separate, resilient nodes. If one fails, the others remain. This is the principle of redundancy. Second, build value that is undeniable and portable. A skill is better than a title because a skill travels with you. A title can be stripped. A pot you made is yours in your hands until you trade it. The value is in the object and the knowledge, not in a line in a register. This is the principle of tangible capital. Third, cultivate networks based on reciprocity, not on legal contract. The barter economy with Olaf, the silent pact with the fox, these are relationships built on observed behavior and mutual benefit. They are harder for a centralized system to monitor or invalidate. This is the principle of social capital outside the system. Fourth, preserve memory in multiple forms. The man remembers his father's hands at the wheel, that memory guided his hands. He does not have the deed to his father's land, but he has the muscle memory of the craft. This is a form of embodied knowledge, a lineage of skill that bypasses the need for a paper lineage. This is the principle of oral and embodied tradition. Fifth, understand the system's rules well enough to find its seams. The man does not try to re-enter the village as a citizen. He operates at its edge in the woods, a space that is ambiguously governed. He uses the system's neglect of that space to build his own domain. This is the principle of interstitial living, finding the cracks in the structure. This integration connects the dots from all previous chapters. The personal suffering showed the need. The systemic analysis showed the mechanism. The historical view showed the pattern. The societal view showed the potential for collective memory. Now, we integrate these into a survival toolkit. The tone is slow and methodical, laying out the principles one by one. The fairy tales embody these principles. The hero is often cast out with one thing, a skill, a kind heart, a magical bean that is really a seed of potential. They use that one thing to build a network, to demonstrate undeniable value, to find allies in overlooked places, to ultimately secure a place within or adjacent to the system, but on their own terms. They do not overthrow the castle, they earn a room in it. This is the wisdom. Systemic erasure seeks to make you dependent on the system for your very existence, so that it can control you. The counter strategy is to make yourself independently valuable, so that the system, or people within it, must engage with you on terms you have partly set. The man's pots are so well made that Olaf seeks him out. The system did not bring Olaf to his door, quality did. This integration provides a bridge from understanding the problem to enacting a solution. It is not a call to arms. It is a call to craftsmanship, to attention, to building small, resilient systems within and around the large, brittle ones. The smell here is the smell of the workshop, of honest labor. The touch is the firm handshake of a fair trade. The sound is the quiet confidence of someone who knows they can feed themselves and fix what is broken, regardless of what a ledger says. This chapter does not promise a happy ending. It provides a map for the journey. The punishment for losing your name is a harsh teacher. It teaches you that the world of names and titles is a game, and you have been disqualified. The manual says, stop playing that game. Start a different one on ground of your own choosing, with rules you can uphold. Build your clearing, make your pots, be reliable. Remember, these are not grand acts. They are the slow, patient work of rebuilding a self from the soil up. And in that work lies a freedom that the clerks in the stone building, with all their lists, will never understand. The seasons turned, the man's clearing was no longer a desperate refuge, it was a homestead. He had built a proper shelter, a low hut with a sod roof and walls of woven branches plastered with clay. It was warm and dry. The garden had been expanded. He had even managed to barter for a few chicken eggs, which he hatched near his fire. Now a small flock scratched in the dirt. The sound of their contented clucking was a new music in the clearing. The fox still visited, but it kept a respectful distance from the birds. An understanding had been reached. The man had become a fixture. The hunter Olaf was not his only visitor now. A woman from the village whose husband had died came with a broken cooking pot. She had heard from Olaf's wife. The man examined the pot. It was a clean break. He could mend it with a staple of forged iron and clay sealant. He did so. She returned a week later with a blanket she had woven, thick and warm. The trade was made. Word spread slowly through the unofficial channels of need and gossip. The pot mender in the wood, the fixer. The one who asks no questions and takes no coin, only trade. This was his reputation. It was a quiet restoration, not of his legal name, but of his place in the social fabric. He was becoming a resource. This is relief, the personal layer, the low cognitive load of a life that has found a sustainable rhythm. The punishment of erasure is a background fact, like an old scar that aches in the cold, but it no longer defines every moment. He has built a life around it. His skill has become his anchor. The sensory details are of settled comfort, the smell of the hut, of earth and wood smoke and dried herbs hanging from the rafters. The touch of the new wool blanket, scratchy but warm, the sound of the rain on the sod roof, a soft drumming patter that speaks of shelter, not exposure. The taste of an egg, fresh and rich. This chapter is slow, it breathes, it shows the result of applying the manual's instructions over time. There is no confrontation with the villains who took his name. They are likely still in the stone building, tending their ledgers. They have forgotten him entirely. He has not defeated them. He has made them irrelevant to his daily existence. He has built a world they do not see and cannot easily touch. This is the quiet virtue matured. It is not about winning a battle. It is about building a life so resilient that the battle no longer matters. The helper, the community itself in its unofficial capacity, has become his network. They do not call him by his birth name. They call him by his function. But in their mouths, the pot mender is a title of respect, not of mockery. It is a name earned. The fox is still there, a silent partner in this enterprise. It reminds him of his first, most fragile alliance, born from a shared potato. That act of kindness was the seed from which all this has grown. This chapter grounds us before the final synthesis. It shows that the story does not necessarily end with a dramatic return and a trap. Sometimes it ends with a well-made pot, a mended tool, a warm hut, and the quiet respect of a few neighbors. This is a form of justice. It is a peace restored through the wisdom of patience and craft. The man may never stand before the gatekeeper again. He may never see his name restored to the ledger, but he has something perhaps more valuable. He has a life that is his own, built with his own hands, recognized by a community of his own making. He has answered the theft not with vengeance, but with creation. He has taken the sawdust loaf of bureaucratic silence and, through sheer stubborn effort, turned it into fertile soil. This is the ultimate lesson of the fairy tale survival manual for many who are powerless. You may not get your castle back, but you can build a cottage that is entirely yours and fill it with things that are real, and in that cottage you are not a ghost. You are the mason, the potter, the gardener, the host. You have many names, all of them true, all of them earned. We examine the final stage of restoration. This is analysis, the societal layer we must advance. We reveal how a restored name or a newly earned reputation rebuilds the social fabric. It is not just a personal victory. It is a corrective to the communal lie. When the hero in the tale finally states their true name or is recognized by their skill, it forces the community to reconcile two realities: the false reality of the mocking nickname and the hidden reality of true identity. This reconciliation heals a tear in the social truth. It restores trust in the principle that merit and truth can eventually be recognized. It punishes the villain not through violence, but through the exposure of their fraud. The villain's power was built on a manipulated social consensus. When that consensus shatters, their power collapses. This is the core logic mechanism of societal justice in these narratives. It is not imposed from above by a higher authority. It emerges from below, from the undeniable evidence provided by the victim's own competence. The new layer of implication is the restoration of social integrity. A community that can admit it was wrong, that can recognize true value even when it comes from an unexpected source, is a healthier community. It is more resilient to future manipulations. The man in the woods may never have a dramatic moment of public recognition, but his growing reputation as a reliable craftsman is a slow, steady form of the same process. The village is gradually admitting, through its actions, that he has value. It is rebuilding a social connection that the ledger tried to sever. This analysis is fast-paced. It dissects the social mechanics of redemption: subject, verb, object. The hero demonstrates truth, the community acknowledges. The villain's narrative fails, the social fabric mends. The smell here is the clean air after a storm, the scent of truth displacing the perfumed lies. The touch is the firm hand of welcome, replacing the cold shoulder. The sound is the murmur of a crowd correcting itself, the gossip turning from mockery to respect. This is why the restoration of a name is so powerful. It does not just give back property, it gives back belonging. It repairs the victim's connection to the story of their people. It says, "You are one of us again, and your chapter in our history has been restored." The fairy tale often ends with a feast, a wedding, a celebration. This is not frivolity. It is the ritual of reintegration. The community gathers to witness and affirm the new, true state of affairs. The shared meal, the music, the dance, these are sensory proofs of restored harmony. The manual's final instruction for the powerless, therefore, is to understand that your victory is not complete until it is socially recognized. This does not always mean a parade. It can mean the quiet respect of your peers, the trust of your neighbors, the ability to walk through the village without being seen as a ghost. It means moving from the margins back into the center of human exchange, not as a supplicant, but as a contributor. This chapter advances our understanding to the culmination of the social process. We see that the theft of the name was an attack on the victim's social existence. The punishment was social exile. Therefore, the restoration must be social reintegration. The man's pots and mended tools are his tickets to this reintegration. They are his argument, his proof of worth. They are slowly rebuilding his social existence, one repaired object, one satisfied customer, one story told at a hearth at a time. The societal layer, which once conspired in his erasure through silence or mockery, is now through a different set of actors. conspiring in his restoration through trade and word of mouth. This is the long, patient work of societal healing. It is the manual's answer to the question of how the powerless can defeat the powerful. Not by becoming powerful in the same way, but by becoming so fundamentally useful and true that the society, for its own health, must eventually make room for you. And in making that room, it subtly changes itself. It becomes a place where a name can be earned, not just inherited, and where a person can be known by their works, not just by their pedigree. This is the peace restored through wisdom. The evidence is presented, the case is closed, the man sits by his fire, the fox is gone, perhaps to its own den, the chickens are roosting. The last pot of the day cools on the stone. In the village, a woman cooks in a mended pot. A hunter swings a sharpened axe. A widow sleeps under a warm blanket. In the stone building, a ledger sits on a shelf. A line is missing. The space is blank. The clerk has gone home. The snow that fell in the first chapter has long melted. The ground where it fell is now a garden. The question was asked: why was losing one's name more dangerous than losing wealth? The testimony has been given, the personal cost, the systemic mechanism, the societal consequence, the historical pattern, the digital echo, the generational theft, the strategies of survival, the quiet restoration. The name was the root, the wealth was the fruit. Cut the root, the tree dies. Take the fruit, the tree may bear again. The ledger records the fruit. It cannot record the sap in the veins, the memory in the seed, the skill in the hands. The man has no line in the ledger. He has a bowl that holds water. He has an axe that cuts clean. He has a garden that feeds him. He has a reputation that travels on foot. He has a legacy of repaired things. The powerful took his name. The punishment was everything that followed. The response was everything he built. The manual is complete. It is written in clay, in wood, in traded salt, in the pattern of a story told for 1,000 years. They took his name first. He is still here.